Not to sound like an annoying, overly dramatic video essayist, but Resident Evil 4 effectively ruined my life. I would not be talking about half the stuff I pretend to care about on YouTube if it weren't for this game, which is odd. You see, the most interesting part about Resident Evil 4 is how uninteresting it actually is. In a vacuum devoid of its legacy or troubled development, what you're left with is just a really good game. That is kind of it. However, in context, it is this tangled mess of seemingly contradictory ideas. It is both one of the greatest games ever made, a masterpiece, but also blamed with killing the very genre it was a part of. It is phenomenal, yet a predecessor to so much wrong with video games as a medium, both mechanically and ideologically. Its ghost can be felt haunting countless games as narrative-based third-person shooters became the predominant genre, where you walk forward, shoot some bad men, and watch a cutscene. A game in Generation Limbo, it doesn't feel like it truly belongs anywhere. It might be a GameCube game, but in comparison with the rest of the console's library, it doesn't fit in. The game is everywhere on everything, yet somehow at risk of being replaced. I would consider criticism of the Resident Evil 4 remake to be somewhat lacking.
So fucking stupid. It's really fucking stupid. This is so fucking bad, oh my god.
That video is 17 hours long. It is somewhat unbelievable that it has already been 2 years and I'm still thinking about this one game, still talking about it. To be clear, this is entirely my own choice. This is not because of ongoing discourse, this is my own brainworms. Most people have moved on to thinking about more current and interesting things. However, I just don't think this game has ever been treated fairly, both by those who hate it and those who love it, myself included. Resident Evil 4 2023 is never allowed to be its own thing. It is never allowed to be taken at its own level and criticized accordingly. It is a game permanently mired in its own legacy. It is forever haunted by itself and the various different culture war talking points it embodies, and I cannot stop thinking about it. I think in a vacuum, Resident Evil 4 Remake is a fantastic game. If we were to look at it on a purely ludological level, as just raw gameplay, I consider it to be the best game of 2023. That being said, Resident Evil 4 is ruined by its context, by its nature as a remake, so let's talk about that, shall we? What is the purpose of a remake? Is it to get closer to an author's original vision, to get over the limitations the original game faced? Cynically, it is just to make money, to exploit the attachment you have to a pre-existing work of art. New ideas are risky after all, people may not be receptive. It does paint a particularly grim picture, where companies are not comfortable with just exploiting their beloved franchises, but instead specific entries. If you'll allow me to be an idealist for a minute, I want to believe there is a value to remakes, that there is something unique and worthwhile to them, that they can be intriguing as adaptations. If you're a fan of the channel, you've heard all this before, that I wanted to consider certain games to be less akin to copy and pasting and more like adapting a novel into a film. That modern games, for better or worse, are an entirely different medium, that the core ideas of an old game need to be translated to work in this new format. A format that, for the record, is not intrinsically better. Resident Evil 2 Remake was often described as making 2 more like 4. Resident Evil 2 Remake is actually not like 4 at all. What it is a modern narrative-based third-person shooter, the predominant genre. Any resemblance to 4 is surface level, and only because the genre was born with it. Resident Evil 2 is actually a fascinating look into how this works. It takes the core ideas, core locations, bits and pieces of iconography, and makes something entirely new out of it. It feels like a game from an alternate universe, one where Resident Evil 2 came out for the first time in 2019, and less like a game trying to recreate something that already exists. This is, as mentioned, a flawed and idealist view of things. Ultimately, no matter how much value I wish remakes had, it is just better to make a new game. That being said, even if these games are mandated by soulless executives, that doesn't actually mean there is no value to them. People still work for these companies, and I don't believe any developer grows up dreaming of one day making an awful, exploitative, nostalgia-bait game. In an industry like this, artists are often forced to flex their talent on projects that are conceptually corporate. Not that this is a totally original idea, but I think it is good to meet a work on its own terms when criticizing it. So I think we need to get one major thing out of the way. Resident Evil 4 2005 and Resident Evil 4 2023, despite the name, are different games. Resident Evil 4 Remake's similarities to the original are all quite surface level. They may have similar plots, characters, and monsters, but how everything functions, the order these events happen in, and their significance are all quite different. While people have absolutely complained about remakes in the past, it was 4 is where I noticed so much criticism boiling down to just differences. Things are different, and that alone is the issue. Modern developers, well, they just don't get it. Resident Evil 4 Remake is not another version of the original, so why did so many people think it was? I want to briefly talk about the absolute worst thing that Resident Evil 4 Remake does. Its biggest flaw, and it happens right after the very start. From here on out, I will be referring to the games as Ori 4 and Remake. This is to try and make it as clear as possible which game I'm speaking about, though also use your eyes to figure that out. The first thing Remake establishes is that it is not the original. While Ori 4's opening is quite warm, Remake's is almost the exact opposite, having more of a mystical feel to it, and a very cold color palette. The entire segment barely resembles the one it is apparently recreating, and at this point the player might be catching on to the idea that this is not the Ori 4 they've grown to love, but something else entirely. Everything is different. The path you take, the reason for doing so, Leon himself, the Ganado's behavior, and most importantly, the first combat encounter, with a brand new enemy type. The Desnucado. You will never guess what that means. This encounter is deeply maligned by the Remake Sucks Brigade, but I think it is what the game needed. They're most likely trying to tell returning players that this is not Resident Evil 4, while teaching new and returning players alike how to play this new game. And then we're going to talk about how it just fucks it all up. It fucks it all up. This encounter immediately tells the returning players that they cannot rely on the muscle memory they've built up over the 18-year gap between the two games, and teaches new players about several different mechanics. That Ganados can transform. Dead Ganados do not always stay dead. If they get caught by it, they are then met with a choice. They can choose to shake the enemy off, which would drain a bit more of their health and deal no damage, or they can sacrifice their knife, which does deal damage, but as they'll soon find out, is a very valuable resource, and that stabbing enemies like this takes a good chunk of durability. It can also teach the player a little bit early about how much mobility matters in this game. If you choose to run back, you are then taught that using your environment and exploiting enemy behavior is possible, avoiding taking any damage at all or using any of your resources. In fact, the first attack being a grab is a great idea, as it is one of the only attacks that cannot be blocked or parried with the knife. This may seem counterintuitive, but dodging is way harder than blocking, and I think it is good to quickly teach the player about these exceptions first, so they are not bewildered when a much stronger, unblockable enemy shows up later. You are going to be getting lots and lots of experience with armed, blockable enemies all throughout the game, so it is better to show these more niche, obscure mechanics first to keep the flow once you get into the actual meat of the game, instead of stopping to teach it then. Once you leave the Shadow Basement, you are then met with another Ganado, this time your first non-transformed one. But once again, it is introduced in a fairly isolated and safe environment, where there is some danger, but he isn't looking directly at you, meaning you can be taught one of the other uses of the knife. Stealth kills. These contrast how the knife is used defensively. You are shown a glimpse of just how useful the knife will be, as it instantly kills this Ganado, and uses less durability than the defense, showing that the game is going to reward you with powerful attacks if you pay attention and don't just start shooting. Yet, it is not a click on the bad men to win type deal, as it still uses up your knife. Alternatively, this and the previous encounter can both teach the player that it is sometimes better to run than to fight, to preserve your resources. We are introduced to typewriters and the case system, and then met with two more lovely fellas and the traps they've set for us. We are also shown that going off the linear path can lead to rewards. This is our first bog standard combat encounter, and it can be tackled in a number of ways. Most importantly, however, it too can be avoided. So if you are low on resources, you may try to just run away. If you do, you are put at risk at being caught in a bear trap, which are far more disguised than they were in Ori 4. When you come upon this hut, you will be unable to explore it for its reward, because the first two guys are still chasing after you. If you instead choose to fight them, you will be met with an elaboration on a previous mechanic. The Desnucado now transforming in front of your very eyes. If you use the knife, you'll see it takes a huge chunk of your durability, meaning from here on out you will have to think, which is more valuable to me right now? Preventing a transformation, which essentially spawns a second enemy, or my knife. Oh, that was so boring, oh my god. Here's a video of me getting hit by a car. Never gets old. So this is all to say that Remake does a pretty good job telling you that this is not Ori 4. As this scene in Ori 4 is a lot simpler. Leon enters house, shoots man, maybe gives him a little kick, and then jumps out a fucking window, to then be met with more basic enemies. This is not an issue, this is great actually. It's almost like Ori 4 is good or something, I don't know. Why I mention any of this is you can see how much the game is trying to send a specific message. The problem is, part 1.2, he said bingo. So, on my corporate art video, which is a bit of a mess admittedly, I got a very telling comment that disagreed with my take that these are different games. And among the shallow arguments like they have the same name was this. He still says bingo. If you don't know what that is referring to, there is a pretty iconic scene early on in the game, right before the second title drop. After the extremely intense village fight and all the horrors you've witnessed thus far, Leon drops a shitty one-liner as everyone's brains are seemingly overwritten, and Remake recreates this scene almost exactly. This is the game's worst mistake. It speaks to the intentions the game had that this line was never actually supposed to be in it. It was supposed to be a different scene, but they just couldn't get anything to work. Intention, however, matters fuck all, because the outcome is the same. After sending one message, the game contradicts itself, tells its players that no, this is the Resident Evil 4 that you love. We are trying to be that. Worst part is, I don't think this user actually cares that he said bingo. No, the problem starts earlier. In fact, the second you pass through that gate. The village fight is, I believe, why this game doesn't work for so many people. Because it is a full recreation. The attempts at subversion do not work. They are not inherently interesting enough, nor are they large enough to dissuade the false idea that this game is trying to be just like Ori 4. There is one opportunity to use a stealth kill if you deviate from the main path, but for a lot of the fight it heavily resembles its older counterpart. So, it tells returning players to fight the villagers all over again. And if they do, they are going to get their shit fucking rocked. They are going to be pissed off that the villagers are now more resilient, that they are so accurate, so fast, that they rush over to you and dig an axe right into your shoulder before you can react. And this is absolutely the game's fault. There is no real defense for this. Because it copies a scene from an entirely different game, it means nothing here is designed to suit the new enemies. It's not difficult because it's tense, it is difficult because it's unfair. Let's talk subversion, shall we? Specifically, the Chainsaw Man. What I would imagine is an attempt to scare returning players just ends up feeling shallow? See, in the original, the Chainsaw Man was an optional enemy in this scene. He would only show up if you fell for the open door trap or tried to leave the village. Now he just shows up anyway. This feels less like a deliberate subversion of expectations, and instead like the game being so hopped up on its own hype and iconography that it cannot contain itself. Don't you remember the guy? Wasn't it so cool and scary when the Chainsaw Man showed up? Don't you remember him? He was all over the marketing. We made controllers for it. You love that, right?
Please buy the deluxe edition.
This scene is just not great, and it is unfortunately not the only one like it. Remake does what I call a nostalgia reset. Essentially, at the start of each of the major areas, village, castle, and island, it will perfectly recreate one scene before going back to subversion or full-on deviation. These remember the place moments, with generously the exception of island, are the absolute worst parts of the game each and every single time they show up, because they are just not designed with new Leon in mind. Other areas may resemble past locations, but they are always functionally different. This is not the case here. A point of contention with this game is its very exact hitboxes, but personally I think it really works, as it rewards careful aiming and routing.
You can execute that route with precision every single time.
I think I have a tiny little headache from getting hit by that car. What was I saying? Oh, right. The game is designed so that you are able to skip certain sections if you know what you're doing, because you can easily shoot through gratings or windows. Granadas can be used as meat shields for more deadly attacks if you lead them correctly, and unlike RE4, can actually get caught in their own traps, which is always very funny. The addition of cluttered, destructible environments, also a little contentious, gives combat a certain frantic dynamism, where it feels like everything in the world is actually interacting with each other. It gives your and your enemy's attacks more weight. Also, it just feels cool to kick an old man through stone. He has fewer bones than he used to.
Okay, back to the village now. We're heading back to the village.
This is where your knife skills probably aren't going to be tested. You are most likely going to be trying to play this scene with your basic abilities. If you're new, you are frantically shooting, probably stressed out of your mind that you went from a max of 3 enemies to a horde. If you are returning, you were definitely trying to do headshot melee setups and getting concerned that it doesn't always work. You were not really taught the value of parrying until the Chainsaw Man. Yes, I criticize his inclusion, but that was essentially because of, like, optics? From a gameplay perspective, he shakes up this scene quite a bit. This, however, can be missed if you never choose to run into the back alleys and try stand your ground instead. Where his true value lies is in teaching both new players, but especially returning ones, that they have to interact with the new mechanics or they're going to have a miserable time. And sometimes you just have to parry. From here, the game can start deviating in fairly major ways and becoming pretty solid. The remaining parts of the first chapter may wear bits of the iconography from RE4, but the way you engage with them is quite different. For many, it was too late. Language around the game is often flawed. People speak about remakes as if they are patches, updates. Sometimes I wonder if online games ruined how we view these sorts of things. No, the Red 9 was not nerfed. It's a different game. See, if you don't know what I'm talking about, in Resident Evil 4, the Red 9 is the best handgun in the game. Blacktail fans, fuck off, you're just objectively wrong. Fully upgraded, it is accurate and the most powerful. Its only drawback being its immense size, but late game case upgrades are fucking huge. So fans, having grown up playing the game for 18 years, cannot rely on that muscle memory of picking up the Red 9 in stock and clicking on the bad guys. I've noticed from some a certain unwillingness to engage with the game as it is, cursing the game when it doesn't give them the exact outcome they want. When I look at gameplay footage from critics of the game, I notice just a little issue. What the fuck is this guy doing? He went the wrong way.
The enemies are also laid out in such a way where the developers clearly want you to run past them. Once you retrieve the statue head, you'll need to use at least 2 flash grenades to get out of here without the enemies being a nuisance.
That's why you had to use 2 stun grenades, man. You're running back through the enemies you chose to avoid. You don't have to do that.
Then somehow contacts Leon even though Luis didn't give her his frequency and she didn't jack his comms. Leon and Ada didn't establish radio contact with each other when they first met. Why would they?
Alright man, calm down, dude. It's a radio. Motherfuckers call Leon all the time. It's fine. What?
And people say the lack of checkpoints leads to true difficulty. What a bunch of morons.
Classy. This video, the 17-hour one, has become a bit of a running gag among my friends because of the so fucking stupid segment. Look, I don't want to strawman all Remake critics with the guy who, and I mean this with no exaggeration, has a joke where he calls the game a remilk instead of a remake, and he tells it like 10,000 times.
Remilk. Guess that really goes to show how many brain cells these people have.
She remilked my evil resident till I've 4? I had written this whole rebuttal to one of the points to show how absurd this video gets, but I realized that would be wasting everyone's time, so if you want to hear me talk about eggs, Patreon bonus video out soon. Of course, there are better critics out there. YouTube is a weird place. I want to have a normal relationship with discourse and responding to other critics, but that's not how it works. The point of this video was to put everything I had been talking about over the past year or two to rest. To finally turn over a new page and start somewhat fresh, tie up all loose ends. Over the course of the past 2 videos being the most successful of mine in forever, I have learned a lot of lessons. One, that I was kinda wrong. I started out doing commentary, and that genre is inherently kind of mean. It supposes a punching bag and places you, the commentator, as above that. Mix that with growing up in a deeply cynical Irish family, and my knee-jerk reaction to people I disagree with online is mockery. I don't see this as inherently an issue. If you want to make fun of me, go ahead. It is your right. However, I'm not talking to my friends. I am a figure with a growing platform, and what I say matters. I was drama posted to the Electric Underground subreddit by someone who admitted to drama baiting. Some of the comments I got because of that were hysterical. It's a YouTuber, man. But it got me thinking. Imagine if one of my fans did that. The disappointment I'd feel if someone criticized me, even in a shitty way, and a fan decided to show me and try get other fans to shit on that creator on my behalf. I'd be pretty fucking annoyed. When I posted my last video, I got someone in my community commending me for my advanced hating, for shitting on the Electric Underground twice. That is not something you want to hear. As a result, I would genuinely, wholeheartedly, like to apologize to Mark for the way I spoke in the past. I'm a hyperbolic person, and that is not an excuse, simply a reason. That being said, I think I figured out what the issue is, why I had that reaction to Mark's work on Resident Evil 4, and I think I discovered something really interesting. So even though talking about the same person 3 times is a little bit much, please let me tie this one up. And Mark, you are a far better critic than I gave you credit for, but I'm still gonna poke a little bit of fun at you. So if I get drama posted to your subreddit again, just know this is entirely jovial. In the video, Resident Evil 5 owns Remake 4. The Electric Underground talks about a few mechanics in Resident Evil 4, but let's focus on the inventory and the map. Despite the fact that Resident Evil 4's inventory is one of the most iconic things about it, he doesn't really like it too much.
Biggest weakness of Resident Evil 4, the menu and weapon system.
Even though it is a great piece of game design that ties your firepower to what you can hold, and rewards thinking about your inventory and strategizing. If I hold this big powerful gun, I might not have the space for healing, or ammo for my workhorse weapons. If I want accuracy and firepower, I have to sacrifice a huge chunk of my inventory to just one gun. Or I could get a much smaller one, but it can never reach the level of my borderline rifle. It's pretty basic game balancing. It's why the game gives you a free rocket launcher when it does, because it is the ultimate reward to quickly deal with a challenging foe. The real challenge, of course, is carrying such a monumental item in your inventory for that long. It is also why in that same room, it gives you a bunch of ammo and asks you to make a decision. The ultimate weapon that can only be used once, or a bunch of ammo for my other guns, but I will have to fight through the grueling middle part of the game entirely on my own. Instead, Mark prefers 5s, where every single item is the same size and there isn't any of that thinking.
The menuing of Resident Evil 5 is the strongest gameplay innovation of the game and is better than the menu of Resident Evil 4 for a number of reasons.
1, it doesn't pause the game, which is whatever. But 2, because of a relatively obscure yet neat mechanic where you can reload your guns in the inventory. And that means all the time, never having to interact with the game's reload animations. This is, and I mean this fully, really cool tech, and it does change the pace of Ori 5's combat. However, he frames this cool little thing as though it is an innovation on the Resident Evil formula, and a flaw with Resident Evil 4 that needed to be addressed.
If we were to remake Resident Evil 4 in a proper sense, this menu would be an amazing addition. So they fixed this. They improved this in 5. All those years ago. But like I said in my review of Resident Evil 4 Remake, we are losing game design just as much as we are gaining. So we lost this whole concept of menu reloading. In Resident Evil 4 Remake, they take a step back. They throw away this innovation of the real-time menu and go back to the old school Resident Evil 4 pausing menu.
So, I understand being frustrated at the pausing and unpausing. However, the situation he brings up, where you see your shotgun isn't loaded so you pick your rifle instead thanks to time freezing, is not an issue. It is just strategizing. What the game is doing is offering tension through the choice. Just because it isn't relying on your panicked fight or flight response doesn't make it not tense. The choice between shotgun and rifle isn't so simple. Your rifle may be loaded, but it is a much more powerful gun with a rarer ammo type. It also requires greater accuracy. The game is giving you time to think up a plan and execute it. Should I take the risk of loading my gun, which is done in real time and not a menu? With the shotgun, I have a higher chance of hitting him and the other enemies thanks to the spread. Or do I use my already loaded rifle to hit just the most dangerous enemy, but run a higher risk of missing, Of course, also, no, reloading your guns is just not a flaw. It is very intentional game design, and it would simply be a different game without it.
Okay, so full clarity, I don't expect him to know this. This is loser shit. Don't take this as a real criticism. But just to back up my point that not having menu reloading is actually a intentional piece of game design, is that menu reloading was in the original Resident Evil 4 kind of right up until release. Here's me doing it right now in an earlier build. It was a thing. It was removed because it sucked, because it ruined parts of the game, and I'm about to explain why.
What did the merchant say?
Gun's not just about shooting, it's about reloading.
Reloading is an obstacle you must overcome and a source of tension as the evil man with the chainsaw comes barreling down your way as you slowly shove more rounds into your gun. To remove that is to remove a fundamental part of the strategizing, the fear, and like the upgrade system. Reload speed is a stat that must be upgraded. If it is something you truly care so much about, it is player freedom to invest their in-game currency into the skills they care about. If they want to be less vulnerable, spend less time reloading, they're going to either have to be more aggressive and daring in combat, kill even more enemies to acquire more money earlier, or go off the path, explore and find valuables that they can sell. Both of these are fantastic and reward risk-taking and curiosity from the player. They also reward mastery, as you can now include all those treasure locations you discovered by being a good observant player into your route and get the upgrades you care about quicker. Despite all this, Mark still frames this inventory system as an objective improvement, despite the fact that were it to be included in Resident Evil 4, it would break fundamental parts of the game. He also says,
I love how weapons don't have bigger inventory and you have to buy bigger cases like a stupid RPG.
What does he think an RPG is? What? Onto the map. And this is where I get ever so slightly confused. Here he loves Ori 5's addition of a minimap that tells you exactly where to go. Now, I personally hate minimaps as a concept, as they take away from the actual game and its world and boil them down to symbols in the corner, especially the type in 5 that literally just shows you exactly where you were supposed to go at all times. God forbid you think about it. But hey, let's hear him out.
So one of the biggest pet peeves I have of the original Resident Evil 4, even though I've almost basically memorized the game, is every now and again you kind of lose track of where you're supposed to go.
What? Huh? So when you play the, for the uninitiated, Resident Evil 4 is a game where you walk forward, speed walk forward. You can't get lost. New players do not get lost. He claims to have nearly memorized the game and yet still gets lost? Can I study you? But that's Ori 4. How does Remake fare in this conversation? Well, thankfully, the game has no minimap to speak of. Could you imagine? Does Mark say where a feature like that could improve the game? Actually, he does.
You have to look at where you're going, especially that stupid section where you have to get in the boat and drive around the boat. I mean, that's lame. You're going, then you have to constantly pause the map, look, okay, where am I here? Close the map. It's slowing down the pace. It's cutting the pace.
Okay, so let's look at the lake for a second. You've just killed Del Lago, Leon wakes up, it's nighttime, you fight through your first encounter with the Plaga Guadana, and then you enter a cave, and it tells you that you need 2 keys. You were then met with a boat. Now, let's just pretend, and this is not aimed at Mark, I know he isn't this, but for the sake of argument, let's imagine we are a dumb idiot baby who needs to be told exactly where to go. You are right next to your objective. Just go forward into the cave. The dock should prompt you to get off, and then it is a linear path up to the top of the cave in which you acquire the first key. You were then routed right back to the dock. Now you were back on the boat and you just go forward. You were met with this area, which is cool. It's a nice little calm area, and we'll talk about it in a second, but it doesn't even have a dock, so you might actually ignore it because you're dumb. And that's fine. That's perfectly fine, because the only place to go is through this really linear cave filled with money, so you know for a fact you were going in the right direction. Then you were spat out into the lake, directly facing across from the cave you were supposed to be in next. The next objective, the other key, it is literally lit up with a giant bonfire, a fucking smoke signal. And if that isn't clear enough, it has a large emblem embedded into it, with the exact same insignia as the one from the cave you got this quest from. You get the key, leave the cave, and now you are facing the original cave with 2 giant bonfires, and you go there, and wow, it's the original dock you started on. Grab the church insignia, and you can go fight El Gigante. You were guided the entire time. You never need the map. It is a last resort only if you completely disorientated yourself. somehow. You don't even need to look at the map on the wall of the cave designed to also aid you. What's worse is that this is like only half the chapter. What makes Chapter 4 work so well in a game like this is that you choose the pace.
It's slowing down the pace, it's cutting the pace, and Resident Evil, at least the action ones, it's all about the pace.
You can run through it if you know what you're doing, or hell, if you just look at the signals the game gives you. Or you can choose to spend time here in the big open area and develop yourself. The lake is a hub of sorts. Like, remember that little dockless area? Well, that answers a question you might have had earlier. As you go through the upper deck in Chapter 3, you may notice this little dangling thing and you shoot it and oh shit, that was treasure, but it fell. How do I get that? Here it is. So the game is directing you to your objective, but also trying to steer you into completing decisions you most likely made earlier. It is also a time to try out your new way shrine key you have optionally picked up. You have been seeing these throughout the game, and this tells you what you're supposed to use the key for. It tells you that you can or will return to those old areas, and will be rewarded if you remember where the treasure was. You get as much out of Chapter 4 as you are willing to put in. It is filled with side quests and rewards, a ship with a new gun in it. You can return to the lakeside settlement from the start of the game, and it's like, oh shit, yeah, there was that drawer in the cabin that you couldn't open before, but you probably know how small keys work now. It gives both traditional rewards and stuff for players who care about world building and immersion. It gives unique combat encounters that can be missed, clarifications on things, and silly side quests that ask you to interact with some of the stranger mechanics of the game. Fish cam. You can now explore old areas safely. The fish farm used to be crammed with enemies, but you can take in the atmosphere and hunt for medallions or parts of a key, and once again, you do not have to do fucking any of this. If you are a go action man, just fucking go get the keys and leave. Go back to shooting men and beasts alike. All of this is to say that the game abandoned the innovation of a mini-map and instead chose yellow paint. That yellow paint guides you where to go in the absence of a mini-map. I fully believe this. I fucking hate yellow paint. So I nearly granted him the point on this one.
Instead, why don't we literally paint lines in the level that the players can follow? Spray paint it for Leon where he needs to go, so you can just follow the yellow paint.
Teeny tiny little problem. I went through the entire game again and noted every single instance of yellow paint I thought was there to guide the player towards their objective. Turns out that isn't what yellow paint is used for in the game. It is used to denote interactability. Boxes, windows, Ashley's climbing walls, certain key items. I have to imagine this is their way of making important things stand out, maybe for low vision players. The only time I can definitively say that this guidance idea is the case is one time in Castle Battlements, where the correct path is a splotch of stupid yellow paint on it. It is also a ladder that can be interacted with, but you see the splotch first.
So I don't trust myself, okay? Despite making this claim, despite going through the game, and I was still like, no, I'm wrong. Because I have to, because everybody was talking about yellow paint. I found one. It is the most conclusive evidence towards yellow paint telling you exactly where to go, because it doesn't denote interactability. And it is entirely fucking useless. The only way I can see it is by using a free camera. You're not gonna see it, because in all of my time playing this game, I've never fucking seen this. This is especially strange because it's just a piece of yellow paint left of, like, Leon, and the bridge explodes, you can't go there. Mendez is behind you, so you can't turn around. Your only option is to go slightly to the left. And your camera isn't facing. Who the fuck is this? Because the cutscene hitbox is fucking huge. So no, I didn't know about this. In all my time playing this game, I didn't know about this. So there's one. Electric Underground gets 1 point, maybe half a point for Castle Battlements. Give him 2 points, be nice.
Every other point is like, yeah, this is one of the correct paths, but it could also just indicate that you can climb here, which is not a thing you do very often. In fact, ladderless climbs, even when facing away from your objective, seem to do this. The hexagonal emblem is another example of yellow paint on your objective, but like, you don't see it until you're already there. So in the big open area of the valley, it doesn't actually tell you where to go. You have to get there yourself through luck or trial and error or just thinking for a sec. The castle, ignore that Ashley is blowing up, also has something similar with the teeniest tiny bit of yellow cloth right next to the point where you can optionally jump off to go unlock the cannon. But there are far better ways to do this, so it probably, like a lot of yellow stuff, denoting an optional interaction for treasure. In the mines, Luis grabs an object covered in yellow paint. This is clearly telling the player that they need to grab Luis's pipe. The game works perfectly fine without yellow. The solution is just to flat out remove it. The solution is definitively not to add a fucking mini-map that treats the player like even more of a baby-brained idiot and dumbs the search down. You might be typing a comment right now. Kai, this is a waste of time. The Electric Underground has a fundamentally different view on games than you do. He loves beat-em-ups and shoot-em-ups, super arcadey, raw, gameplay-first experiences. You love artsy-fartsy bullshit and cringe. That is why I'm talking about this. See, in his videos, he speaks so authoritatively about the subject, and the thing is, if you had to choose between me and him for informed criticism on action games, you should choose him every single time. But Resident Evil is not just action. It is action horror. The tragedy of these videos is that an action game fan's perspective on this is really interesting. It is so far removed from how I would think about it that I actually super enjoy this sort of thing. But it truly is the framing that hurts these videos. No, it is not a flaw that you can't reload like that. It is not a flaw that it isn't all out action all the time. It is not a flaw that you have to make decisions. It is not a flaw that the game can be paused. It is not a flaw that the game is sometimes unpredictable, and just because a game has some upgrades doesn't make it an RPG. At least in the Ori 4 videos, there is no thought given that his personal perspective from a fairly niche viewpoint is not the intended one. He speaks as if he is in direct contact with the original developers. He insults and belittles the hard work of the talented artists and game designers who worked on Remake because it doesn't live up to expectations it was never supposed to.
But now, millennial game designers, that bullshit. We're so smart and clever. What we're gonna do is we're gonna have these really intellectual styles of gameplay. So instead of sitting down and programming out how much distance does the grab have, how fast can the enemy move, how much tracking does this attack do, instead it's just simply just press duck. So grabs will track you from across the world, enemies will hunt you down from across the stage.
It didn't pivot into a genre not even the original was. Not only is it a bad game, but it is also a moral failing. An example of this I find interesting is in the original video, the one that says Remake has no artistic integrity. I want to zoom in on a section here, near the end, a bit on art direction. One, because I just find it to be an interesting example of that authoritative speaking, but two, it's a great lesson for editors out there. So the point is that Remake uses cheaper, more generic horror elements to create its world, that instead of relying on smart design, the game just makes everything dark and bloody, and that's how it achieves its horror feel.
Kind of the go-to plan for the remake is whenever we want to make something scary, let's just make it cluttered, dark, and bloody. That'll do the trick.
Editors, are you listening? If that is your point, do not show a comparison that is brighter with no blood in sight. Look how fucking dark his Ori 4 footage is. That's not even what the game normally looks like. It's darker for some reason. Ori 4's opening is dark, it is overcast, it is hard to tell what time of day it actually is, and it is filled with shit like this. This is one of the first things you see. Gore, blood, you know, the things he thinks is trying too hard. This footage focuses on the farm, one of the fucking funniest examples you can pull from because A, again, darker, but B, Ori 4 has this giant fucking pile of corpses and body parts covered in blood being eaten by maggots right there. Like, it's right there. It's right there. It is huge and unsubtle. In Remake, there is something similar outside the farm, but it's like animal parts. I'm not saying that this is bad or that subtlety is better. Ori 4 and subtle are two concepts that are worlds apart from each other. He then goes on to give a specific example, the castle.
Now let's go to what I think is the biggest monstrosity of the game, the castle. And they did such a horrible job with the castle. So the Resident Evil 4 castle, it is brightly lit, it is beautiful, it is ornate, it is creepy. Something is wrong, but that wrongness is subtle. So what did they do with the remake? They turned it into a Saturday morning cartoon. They turned it into a generic horror show where now the castle is dark and spooky and bloody. So now they have to change the rooms into that stupid generic, oh, it's a tiny little hallway, because they didn't have the artistic insight to understand the beauty of the castle's original design and the fact that it is brightly lit and ornate.
This footage is very telling. He is not comparing apples to apples here. He is comparing a normal area to an actual fucking dungeon, to make the point that unlike RE4, Remake is just too damn over the top. That the original castle is subtle, that it is like a normal place, but something is off, just uncanny. It doesn't need to rely on darkness. This is a castle with like a fucking lava room. Like, not to turn his own words back on him, but like it is filled with dumb cartoon stuff, like actual Scooby-Doo shit. It's awesome, I love it. I wish Remake was this cartoonish and dumb and spooky, but okay. Back to the dungeon. He complains that it is, you know, dark and dingy and not opulent like RE4's castle, and it's filled with these tight spaces and corridors and corpses. I mean, pretty damning. Well, what if I told you there was this section in RE4 that was dark, dingy, a literal dungeon, was the introduction of an enemy type that's whole thing is hiding so it can jump scare you? And it had these tight corridors and cells with corpses and blood in them. What if I told you that Remake's castle has these beautiful, opulent, clearly lived in locations that feel like a real rich person's house, but something is off? Remake's castle is gorgeous. It is opulent. Where are these locations in the footage? I fucking love RE4's castle. I think it is one of the most beautifully designed locations, has the strongest art direction in the series. I even think it's miles better than Remake. But this is horrible advocacy. He says the game was inspired by The Shining, and no, it wasn't. What Mark has done, why I find this so damn interesting, is noticed a pattern. A similarity in two works, brightly lit and well-framed horror. That does not an inspiration make. RE4's inspirations are pretty on the nose at times. The Resident Evil film, there's Alien in there, Indiana Jones, and of course Dagon, to name a few. I have been thinking about this for a bit. I think it's so interesting. Mark is not wrong in the pattern he noticed. That lighting and framing matter a lot to horror. That you do not need to hide things in the shadows to be unnerving. That these two works share that surface level similarity. But that isn't framed as an observation, it is a fact. And the developers behind Remake, by failing to live up to an inspiration the original never had, aren't just making a bad game. It is also a moral issue. Why is it like this? I can point out so many other strange aspects of these videos, but each one nearly requires an entire video in and of itself to explain. I cannot definitively answer that question, at least not in a narratively satisfying way. At times it feels like Mark simply wants to hate the game regardless of what it does. I'm not going to accuse anyone of anything, I cannot know what is in people's heads, but I know how I think. As a YouTuber, as someone involved in media discourse, I don't want to give the game away too early, so let me explain how this video started. I wanted to make a video re-examining my love of Resident Evil 4 Remake, a game that I had spent a lot of time already defending. I don't know if I can say that I wanted to find reasons to hate it, but I don't think I'd be too upset if I did. As a result, when returning, I specifically chose to play the worst mode that the game had, or so I thought. If you've listened to me in the past, you may have heard me mention that I consider Remake's professional difficulty to be one of the worst things the series has ever done. However, I had only really played it one way, to get S+. See, if you don't know, Remake post-game is phenomenal. If RE4 invites you to do a second playthrough, Remake practically begs you. And Professional S+ is a ridiculous challenge that requires you to beat the game on a strict time limit with only 15 saves. Meaning I did not engage with it as a normal playthrough, but instead as a min-max speedrun, with my infinite ammo submachine gun and cockhead. At that, it was still a complete and utter nightmare, with grabby enemies and insane damage, and nothing felt fair. Everyone was a bullet sponge. This might be how you do difficulty in those other Resident Evils, but not here. Long removed from the stress of the game's hardest challenge, I decided to play it again, this time with the express purpose of hating it. I know I couldn't rely on the otherwise foolproof strategies the other difficulties allow for, and it was amazing. It was a light bulb moment. Something switched in my brain, it all made sense. Every single decision, every single change, every single choice suddenly just worked. Professional is Resident Evil 4 Remake without the Resident Evil 4. This can never be someone's first experience with the game. It's an unlockable difficulty. meaning it is unshackled from the need to be anything else, from the need to please old fans at all. It can be its own thing, and it is wonderful. The Village, previously a poorly done copy and paste, is now a test of everything you've learned before. Your ability to survive with limited resources, your ability to outmaneuver your enemies. Remake is a game all about mobility. Combat doesn't let you rest, you can't stand your ground, and that's a good thing. While the other difficulties may superficially resemble RE4 closer, this is paradoxically where I think Remake is closest. On a spiritual level, RE4 is a game about conquering fear, about mastery. What seems initially clunky, counterintuitive, hard to control, overwhelming can all be overcome. Leon's gun may sway more. His movement may be strange and heavy. It may sometimes feel less like you are him and more like you're guiding him, as it takes him a while to speed up and come to a stop. But that too, like the original, is a challenge that must be overcome. Professional difficulty is not just hard mode. That's hardcore's job. Professional requires true knowledge of the game. Despite what some may say, Remake absolutely has iframes and hit stun, and they feel amazing to pull off. They aren't gone, they're just different, tighter, built for a different Leon. When you come in without the weight of its namesake, without the expectations, every mechanic makes sense. All the upgrades are way more important. The time you spend building your Leon matters in a different way. Because at any point it could be lost. There are no checkpoints anymore to exploit. Every save is manual, every decision must be calculated, every mistake must be lived with. Enemies that cannot be parried become incredibly dangerous. Even something as simple as the stun rod gun auto, you have to live with the fact your fuck-ups can cascade. Each weapon is then recontextualized. Your shotgun is not what it used to be, it is now a tool to push enemies to the ground and make your escape. You have to watch your back a lot more, as Ganados can pop out of anywhere and ruin your day. I can go on and on and on, and literally none of it matters, even remotely. What would be a phenomenal game under any other name? It could have just been RE4 inspired, and its shakeups on the formula would be far more forgiven. It would be so much easier to just say the game is bad, to have it contribute to my ideology on games, on art, to say this is soulless, to call it slop, to insult millennial game designers, or whatever he's on about. That would be a far more compelling story, but that's not the one we got. Resident Evil 4 Remake sits in the perfect spot for contrarianism, a beloved remake of a beloved game. That original game itself, sitting in the middle ground between old clunky design that makes you look like a bit more of a seasoned player for putting up with, but not so old it is actually difficult to learn. It is the birth of the most generic type of video game after all, and if you were playing on more modern hardware, then the default controls have all been remapped to more closely resemble what they would be if the game came out today. At least on the surface, this remake seems to sand off the rough edges of the original, treat intentional pieces of game design as mistakes to be corrected. If we are to view remakes solely as attempts at replacement, then it is a great failure. If we view remakes as a pointless corporate endeavor devoid of artistic integrity, then the game was rigged from the start. So why doesn't it stop there? Because that's just not how YouTube works. It is far better to spin a narrative, to say that the developers, the creatives working on these games aren't just working for bad companies, but have something fundamentally wrong with them. They hate what you love. They love injecting things into games, and everyone is blind to it. It is better to spin a narrative about games journalism as if anyone gives a fuck. No, there is no chance that these journalists have a different opinion, that they have different philosophies on games. No, they are cowards. Nobody has the balls to say the truth. Finally, someone will question the sacred product. Quality and morality are, for whatever reason, intrinsically linked in media discourse. Well, maybe not stated outright, it is immoral to make bad art, but good art is moral. It is free, it is not corporate, regardless of how it was made or monetized. Previously, we looked at Krobcat making his little fawning edit of a documentary, where the point is that it was filled with soul. But it was for a game that dumbed down and modernized not just a franchise, but an entire studio. It was the birth of microtransactions. However, it's old enough now for nostalgia, and we like the game, so it must be morally good, and those who disagree aren't just wrong, there is something wrong with them. They are corrupt shills, or maybe just idiotic sheep who need to be told what to think. I wish I was better than that. But I don't think I am. One thing I need to make clear before I presumably stop talking about Mark forever is that me and him agree on the fundamental problem. We both agree that there is this false idea that video game design has progressed linearly in quality, that each generation of game design is an improvement on the last, and that we need to constantly be renewing and remaking games to keep them good. This is, of course, a false and horrible idea, and I'm really glad that people are calling it out. I'm really glad that he said this.
The belief that ever since video games first began, video game design has been on a perfect upward trajectory. Year by year, game developers are getting smarter and more sophisticated. It's like Moore's Law.
The problem is, of course, everything else. The way he goes about proving that point. For Resident Evil 4 to be good, Resident Evil 4 Remake must be bad. But this video is not about Resident Evil 4.
Has this ever happened to you? Everywhere on the internet sucks right now. I can't go fucking anywhere. Twitter, more like shitter. Then I have the perfect fucking solution. Whoa. What was I saying? You need to join the Guys Home for Inspired Vampires server. That's right. The home is a real place that you can go to. Go to. You can send text, images, maybe a little bit of sound. That's right. You can call your friends. Who needs a phone when you got the Guys Home for Inspired Vampires community server? Oh boy. My phone screen just changed color. I'm not even joking. Did I hear that you like amazing emotes? Look at that. Whoa. We got just an immaculate fucking soundboard. Listen to this. I actually do not know what that is. Fun commands. Carl, how do I join the server? Carl, behead my father. Just listen to these amazing reviews.
Let me go grab my controller.
Want more out of your experience? Want more Kai in your life? That's great. I absolutely have the fucking solution. Oh, you've been waiting for this day, haven't you? Oh, you have. You motherfucker. You piece of shit. God damn. That's right. You now. That's right. You now have the ability to give me money. Okay, picture. Oh, I dropped my microphone. Picture this. Imagine you had money, but imagine if I had it instead. And that's Patreon. That's right. So make sure to join the free server. But if you want a little bit extra, a little bit more, consider subscribing on Patreon, because it helps me continue what I'm doing. So if you enjoyed this, and if you didn't, do it anyway, because I love dollar. Yippee! New $1 tier. What? $1 whole dollar? What? Did you know that Krauser from Resident Evil 4 was actually from Bristol? It's where he got the name.
So fucking stupid. Really fucking stupid. This is so fucking bad.
That comment, the one about the sacred product or whatever, was left on a re-upload of an, in my opinion, bad video on RE2. One that now, looking back at it, feels like a mirror of sorts. There is a weird dedication to nitpicking. While in the grand scheme of things it is a short moment, it feels incredibly long as the narrator makes fun of the game for having Leon change outfit early on. It's a zombie apocalypse. Why would he give any thought to fashion?
Leon changing into a police outfit is so fucking stupid, but the fact that in the middle of a zombie outbreak he decides to switch up his look is so funny. Like, they didn't even wreck his other clothing or anything. It's so stupid. Why does he change into a cop uniform? And in B's scenario, it's even funnier because he just sees one and is like, guess I should put this on.
To pretend this matters even remotely for a second, Leon still thinks of himself as a police officer at this point. He spends the game larping this role. He wants to do things by the book. It is part of his character. He is treating the outbreak in Raccoon City as an extension of his duty as an officer, which is why he shoots everyone. Also, it's fucking armor and has holsters and hip pouches. It is very advantageous to wear this. If you were in a dangerous situation, would you not prefer to have armor? They laugh at him just finding the gear in the second run as if that isn't how the entire game works, where you just stumble upon useful stuff. Does it matter that Claire looks closer to Revelations than the original? No, it doesn't. Yet it has to. Ding. When I see these sorts of videos, I can only see myself, the media I disliked, the art I hated. When you come into something with such a negative view, begin making a critical work, there is a tendency to notice things no one would ever care about. You may have disliked the work initially, that is entirely possible and might even be the case. But it's upon returning to it with this new intent in mind that things start to fall apart. While I can't say I can read anyone's mind, I know what it's like to come up with a catchy title. The Resident Evil remakes are genuinely like life giving out lemons to contrarians. It is the perfect storm. But once you come in, knowing you want to make a long video about how bad something is, all those little contrivances, all those small issues, if they can even be called that, become glaring. Noticing things is fun. One of the worst parts about writing a script is all the cuts you have to make, all the observations you made that have to be let go, because in the grand scheme of things they simply do not matter. I am very lucky to have caught on to this when I did. I nearly made an entire series that was like this. A borderline CinemaSins nitpick fest about something loved enough to be interesting to hate, but hated enough to get plenty of support for my series. I could have been any of these people, and to some degree, I still am. I want to present you with a reality. One that closely resembles our own, but just isn't. When you watch this video, you, for a brief amount of time, enter a world where we pretend these opinions matter. We pretend that these disparate ideas and the critics who spout them are all somehow connected in a wider narrative. I am telling you a story about art and online criticism. Ultimately, YouTube is entertainment. Regardless of how some people try to present themselves, we are often relegated to background noise. This is now more obvious than ever, as it seems that effort is no longer rewarded. How many channels have switched their main format to streaming at this point? We value this false idea of authenticity. I have been told by so many people that they wouldn't mind if my videos were less scripted because they don't care. They may have some pretentious idea about authenticity, but really they just want more videos to half pay attention to. Why can't a script be authentic? I wrote it. I wish I hated Resident Evil 4 Remake. It would be so much easier. I want to present you with the idea that I have good taste, that I have better taste than you do, that I am someone worth listening to, and somehow this beloved, critically acclaimed game is the one thing stopping me from feeling confident that I can. It's too new, it's too well liked. How boring. Oh, you like it too? Prepare to be lost in the noise of the countless people who gave it 9s and 10s before you. To stand out, you must perform. You must be more incendiary, call everyone cowards, and be a bit of a provocateur. I wanted to hate Silk Song. Do I have actual grievances with Silk Song? Kinda? I don't really like how people spoke about it like it was the second coming of Christ. There was a lot of weird worship of the developers and long development cycles that rubbed me the wrong way. There was either implicit or explicit shaming of developers who can't develop or price their games like Team Cherry can. I don't hate it actually, yet there is still that impulse. When people act like a really good Metroidvania is going to forever change games, I just don't get it. And when people say Ori 4 Remake is the perfect replacement, how are you not supposed to get annoyed about that? How are you not supposed to hyper-focus on all the ways the game is worse? Of course, I have made my opinions on how nothing is intrinsically better when it comes to games, and we maybe shouldn't say they have to be one way. That being said, God, wouldn't it be a pretty crazy title to say I hate Silksong or Silksong isn't a masterpiece? I could ride the wave of the game's popularity. Maybe if the video got big enough, it could even change some people's minds. Because there are real people around us who actually get their opinions from YouTubers. Please don't do that. Meta video essays are the worst kind. Or so I thought. Of all of them that I've come across, I don't think I've agreed with a single one. They seem to center themselves more on drama nonsense and commentary videos. What I missed, of course, was their true utility. These are fascinating because they show the truth, that over time, video essay has just begun to mean video. Commentary videos, summaries of media and Wikipedia articles, iceberg charts and random opinion pieces, all of these are video essays to someone. to a lot of people even. Of course, terms and their meaning are owned by the people who use them. If we agree that I am a video essayist, then I am a video essayist, regardless of how little I resemble the traditional idea of one. Of course, I am worried about how this links with cringe culture and anti-intellectualism. Even if we are criticizing them, if we present drama-baiting shitheads as essayists, it grants them a legitimacy that they do not deserve. Though, why is this? Why does the term video essayist hold the weight it does, at least in my mind? It may or may not surprise you depending on how poor you think my analysis skills are, but I don't really come from watching lots of video game analysis. Prior to making my own videos on the subject and joining a community of other essayists, I didn't watch or read any really. I watched capital E video essays, the academia larpers. In my own community, I've had people claim that these sorts of channels were instrumental in their lives, that without them they would have fallen down the alt-right pipeline, and of course, this is not the case. For one, give yourself a little bit of fucking respect. You hold the beliefs you do, presumably, because you are a human being with functioning empathy. Your ideology is informed by who you are, and definitely not some YouTuber you watched. I often wonder if it's time for the genre's collapse. Given how little the term means anything anymore, given the rise of anti-intellectualism, given the utter hatred the modern internet has for sincerity, and of course, the world that spawned these creators is very different from the one we have today. In my corporate art video, I said the following. Recently, I watched a video essay so flawed that it kinda put me in crisis mode. It forced me to reflect on everything I have done and how I criticize media, because I saw myself within it. It had all the hallmarks you'd expect. A non-standard aspect ratio, bisexual lighting, and an air of obnoxious self-seriousness combined with just the sneaking feeling that they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. This was a lie. Okay, maybe that's strong. I wanted to present you with an idea. I used a stereotype to make it about anyone and no one. Whoever you want, just put their face here. Truly, Doug Walker was a visionary. I wrote it this way, but I had my own idea of who I was talking about. The point of no return for me, that video did not have bisexual lighting. It was Alexander Avila's AI Wars. How corporations hijacked the anti-AI movement. Genuinely a fucking James Somerton title. The title has since been changed. I'm not going to engage with the actual main text of the video, I don't think it's good, but I have no reason to argue against it and waste more of our time. No, I want to look at why I think this video exists. The video feels like it is working backwards. The left hates AI right now, so I must be the contrarian. There's always this urge to performatively get on your high horse, to signal how much smarter you are than everyone else, the one free thinker in a world of sheep. The video feels like the essayist equivalent of a pretentious tweet. Truly, it is all just because the majority of the left actually agrees on something for once. I must disrupt that. It is my chance to generate some controversy. Contrarianism is just that little bit more important than the actual truth. In a time as tumultuous as ours, is there really any space for this form of political theatre? And I do mean that literally. Should we abandon the costumes and coloured lights? Should we get off the stage? I recently watched another essay, one that I can only assume was well-meaning, but it too feels like an encapsulation of how this genre is now dated. It was about J.K. Rowling, and while no point made was particularly egregious, the whole presentation of it just doesn't feel right. The political project of TERFs like Rowling is currently manifesting in reality. She is winning, she is succeeding at every level. Do we have time for this? Who fucking cares about the children's books right now? Why is it like this? Why do you keep showing fucking dropout clips, man? It was kind of a breaking point, to be fully honest. Watching someone hold a sword the entire time as they consistently swap between the characters of the activist, the fan, and the critic. It was all just a bit too much. Does any of this matter? Is any of this actually wrong? Or am I just an asshole? Is it so immoral to wear a witch's hat while you talk about oppression? Am I judgmental, not a victim of cringe culture but an active participant? Can I even do that? I am constantly aware that I am throwing stones from the most fragile of glass houses. It's why the channel is the way it is. I don't speak on serious subject matter, not because I don't want to, not because I don't care, but because I am hyper aware of who I am, the symbols I use to represent me. When you place real world issues in the same video as your Vampire Fox OC, it just feels wrong, doesn't it? I don't just dislike AI wars, I am jealous of it. To have the gall to do this, to have the utter lack of self-awareness, to perfectly capture the failed filmmaker archetype that so many in this genre fall into, I wish I was brave enough to say something like this. Maybe if I was brave enough to hate Resident Evil 4, then this video would get enough views that I can actually make some real money this time. That I can do this, write and edit videos for a living. Wouldn't that be the dream job? Misrepresenting my own ideas constantly to make them more sensationalist? Who is to say what is sincere? Who is to say that it is even valuable? I cannot say that for certain, but I do know what it is like to lose yourself under countless layers of irony. To be so worried about everything you do that it makes you deeply and corrosively jealous. Your own insecurities manifest as shaming and shutting down anyone who isn't as miserably self-aware as you are. To tie up another loose end on the channel is Tears of the Kingdom. I want to love Tears of the Kingdom. I adore Zelda with my entire heart. To have a game like this is so heartbreaking. One that is fine, but made awful by its context. By being the first Zelda game that will be forgotten to bring nothing worth remembering. The harshest criticism I could ever give this series. Yet I don't believe that this is a moral issue. That's not YouTube-y enough though. So we must invent one. No matter how much of a stretch it may be. YouTuber Skitty Bitty's video, I hate Tears of the Kingdom, is whatever. Most of it does not matter. It is what we have covered before. Bad media criticism. Then suddenly it changes. You might come away from this thinking Tears of the Kingdom is poorly designed, but that would just be true. No, you can't dislike something for being flawed. Where is the moral component? Skitty talks about the caves, a system that only serves to flesh the world out a little bit. Give you some stuff to explore, some combat encounters, just an expansion on the core Breath of the Wild gameplay. They aren't all too interesting, sometimes they have cool stuff, sometimes they don't. It's not a very good game, as I said. Though, Skitty does not allow this to be the case. No, it isn't just lazy. For it to be bad, it must be evil.
When I first ran the numbers on this to try to figure out how many caves had worthwhile content in them, my takeaway was that it was lazy to leave so many of them basically empty. But I actually think it's more sinister than that.
They directly say that the caves are actually sinister, that they are Skinner boxes designed to trick you, designed to make you addicted to, again, the boring Tears of the Kingdom caves.
It's why people get addicted to slots or gacha games or checking their phone, or why they stay in unhealthy relationships long after the other person has stopped treating them well. And that is why more than half of the caves in Tears of the Kingdom are empty.
Allegations of trying to hijack the reward system in the brains of people with disorders.
Not to mention addictive, especially for people with dysregulated reward centers in their brains, people with depression or ADHD, for example.
This is fucking absurd and dangerous. To throw such intense allegations around is so irresponsible and downright horrible, and the comments don't give a shit. I feel like my words do not truly convey how absurd this is, how shitty this is to do. Nintendo gains nothing from you exploring all the caves. It isn't like they can drain your money on pools. It's exploring a cave in a video game. They made the money already. Just say you think it sucks. This video is what I always feared I would become. In an attempt to rain on everyone's parade when they are happy about a new release. To be the first to shit on it, to hopefully use that to get 1 million views. That I just abandon any semblance of reality to invent a moral, to justify the title, to justify my hatred. Skitty's video does not come from a normal place. They were thinking about more deeply strange, nitpicky reasons to hate the game at like 1 in the morning.
It's 1:12 in the morning, and I can't sleep because I'm thinking about the Skyview Towers.
That's not normal. The fact that even this was a performance of sorts, not something written to a notes app, but seemingly to their Discord, where people could react to it. Performative hating. I guess kind of like what that fan said to me, huh? I was like this once. I wrote so many words, every single little nitpick of a game I didn't understand, because I didn't want to. I went in expecting something it never was, and judged it based on that. Did not meet it at its own level, and wasted so much of my own time, so much of my own life, because I came up with a catchy title. With an idea I thought would be unique, would carve out my niche in this awful website, because you need a niche. You have to play the game, you have to always be performing, you have to be incendiary, you have to be above it all, you have to rage bait. In 2005, a GameCube game was pretty successful, and pretty critically acclaimed, and ever since we have been unable to let go. We have contorted it into countless different shapes. So many things bear its name. They aren't the same, though they all have that spirit, at least I think. In 2023, we took it further than we ever have before, made new art wear the old art's skin. And while I want to be cynical about that, I want to say I hate this fraud. For a brief moment, Resident Evil 4 was alive again, properly. It was the characters and the world I had grown to love, long since dead, briefly reanimated, with plenty of new words to say, new locations to explore, and then it all just ends. Letting go is difficult. It is the fact that it was revived that makes it even harder, knowing that this will most likely be it, at least I hope so. That there will be no more Resident Evil 4, no second remake. That is good, it should end. Yet the selfish part of my brain wishes that weren't true. To some degree, Resident Evil 4 and its remake are infinite games. They can be played endlessly in countless combinations, New Game Plus after New Game Plus. The actual written narrative having long since broken down. That isn't the same though, is it? It can never do something new, it can never grow more rooms, there won't be new lines, new scenes, new nostalgia to exploit. I find Infinity fascinating. B3313 is one of the most overlooked and underappreciated fan games ever made, despite its popularity. I see next to no one respect what it truly is. Perhaps because it has mainly been covered by Nintendo and horror channels who will only look at it through those specific lenses. I want to look at it on its own terms. Mario 64 does not matter to it. It is only the platform it uses. The fiction the game presents is this mysterious unfinished version of the game where it keeps generating functionally infinite new content. New rooms, new levels, new enemies and characters. It is a game about symbols, about stretching them out. It is not allowed to end, and just by iterating on the same pieces of iconography, the same ideas, same symbols over and over again, eventually you will get something horrific. When no care is given to art, just content, you will find things deeply inhuman, soulless and nonsensical. The irony, of course, being that all of B3313 was designed by humans. There is a comfort in infinity. Letting go is hard. The idea that there are only so many things to see, only so many people to be, only so many possible experiences, and of course, that your favorite work will end. Eventually, you will know all there is to know, and you will be left with no other option but to let go. And that is a good thing. For as much as I love Remake, it is terrible that it exists. That it could not let go. On YouTube, there is always this fear that straying too far from your niche will make you lose everything. That if you are not regurgitating slightly novel versions of what you are already known for, then the algorithm will not recognize you and leave you in the dark. This fear creates such stagnant art. We've been forced to look at everything as just numbers. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's sold well, if it has lots of views, if it keeps me successful, I must do that. There is no other option. Why would Resident Evil 4 ever have to stop printing money? Why would I ever need to innovate if this works just fine? Anger is so potent, it can be so easily manipulated. The thing you like, the art you love, I am going to say that it is evil and work to retroactively justify that claim. I don't consider myself a very good writer. I don't think I have done a particularly good job connecting all these ideas. It is just so tragic that we have let algorithms dictate every single aspect of our lives. What we watch, what we play, what gets made, what we make. I don't know my place on this website, on the internet, or in general. I always feel like a bit of an idiot, slowly stumbling my way upwards. Maybe that's what needs to be said. That I don't have an answer to these problems. Despite the genre's conventions of calls to action and deep moral grandstanding, I simply don't know. It isn't satisfying, but this isn't a story. This isn't theater. I could give a half-baked lesson, but it would just ring hollow. I am ready to turn over a new page. Enter a new era of Kai's home, free from 2023's many burdens. I hope you'll join me for a better future. I've been Kai from Kai's Home for Aspiring Vampires. And Mark, if you're somehow still watching, seriously, how did you get lost? Just walk forward! I would just like to thank patrons Arcagent Everlasting, App, Autumn, Dayglow, Goma, Nico, Saxon, Sammy3D, Hyperwaffles, It's June for their continued support.
So fucking
Good.
really fucking
Good.
This is so fucking
Good.
oh my
Good.
god.